Although economic conditions can be a major factor in the decision to terminate, they're certainly not the only reasons. Another major reason in any market is if one party is performing their side of the contract inadequately. And this can take many forms. For example, in shipbuilding contracts, we see them being terminated because the buyer believes that the workmanship is below the required standard, or if there are significant delays to the project. A party may also refuse or be unable to perform a key term of the contract and therefore be in breach, potentially entitling the other party to terminate. So all of those are potential reasons for termination that aren't really linked to the economic context. Finally, and as you can see on the screen, impossibility of performance of the contract, which can be created by external events. For example, the loss of the subject matter of the contract would also, under English law, give a termination right. And that is something we'll be looking at in significantly more detail later on in this presentation. Like I said, looking in particular on whether the COVID-19 circumstances would be sufficient for a right to terminate by virtue of the operation of the doctrine of frustration. So when can a party lawfully terminate their contract? Let's go back to basics and consider, we've just discussed the reasons that might lead to a party wanting to terminate, but under what circumstances would such a termination right arise? Under what circumstances would the termination be legitimate? Broadly speaking, a party can only terminate if it has a right to do so by virtue of the terms that it has agreed with the other side, or by virtue of the operation of the law.
Now, Rani has already touched upon frustration and explained the principles, but just looking at it from a charter party perspective, frustration can relieve one party from performing the contract if that party can establish that it was impossible for it to do so. The hurdle to prove that a contract is frustrated is high, and as a result, frustration is difficult to prove. Where a contract is frustrated, then it's automatically terminated. Now, this happens when an event occurs after the formation of the contract that makes it either physically or commercially impossible to perform a fundamental obligation in the contract, or it makes performance radically different to that originally envisaged when the contract was entered into. It's not possible for parties to a charter party to claim frustration where the alleged frustrating event should have been foreseen by the parties, or the contract was simply made more expensive to perform, or alternatively the parties have made provision for the consequences of the intervening act by, for example, a force majeure clause. For either party to seek to frustrate the charter party, the party seeking to rely on it must establish that it's impossible for it to comply with a fundamental obligation in the charter party. The test for this is actually the same as the test for a repudiatory breach. So it has to have such a radical effect as to undermine the foundations of the contract. And the difference between the two is that frustration must be caused by an extraneous event rather than the fault of either party. For example, it could be a significant delay or destruction of the subject matter, for example, a total loss of the vessel, that makes the contract impossible to perform. Frustration terminates the charter party automatically, so neither party has a choice as to whether or not to treat the contract as alive or not.